In the prototyping phase, you should be really focusing down on, like, that's where you can have all these great ideas, all these cool features, all these interesting design strategies. Dream as big as you can. What is the absolute bare minimum that I can do at a really high level of quality? Okay, let's build this, let's put it together. This video is for people that are about to start prototyping their product or are in the midst of putting their prototype together. We get a lot of people reaching out to us that have a prototype. Usually it's someone that has a prototype put together that's beautiful, it's functional, it's ready to go, but it's not really ready to go into production. There's still a few things that need to take place, and these are the top things that I wish people knew before they started through the prototyping process. So first off, having a physical functioning prototype put together is different from having a product that can go into manufacturing, or it doesn't always mean that it's all ready to go. Let's say, for example, you 3D printed a lot of the components on your prototype. 3D printing doesn't make sense for mass production. It's really expensive. It takes a long time. It just doesn't make that much sense. Most plastic components that, if you prototype using 3D printing, will need to be manufactured using plastic injection molds. So these are two very different, manufacturing processes. 3D printing is a manufacturing process, but the design, what you can 3D print isn't necessarily what you can plastic injection mold. Things like certain draft angles, or how the molten plastic is coming into the mold. These are things that you need to keep in mind when you're developing a component using something like 3D printing or using CNC machines to machine away plastic. So we call it design for manufacturing, DFM for short, and that's sort of making sure that however you've designed it, it's designed to be manufacturable. We've talked about this in a couple of other videos, but it's one thing that I wish more people kept in mind as early on as possible in the prototyping and development process. It's kind of hard to, if this is your first go at developing a product, you probably want to consult someone that knows about the manufacturing process, or if there's engineers that are familiar with plastic injection molding and have a lot of experience with that, they can give you a lot of insight into, this is probably a better way to design this component because it'll be easier to manufacture at scale. And that comes into cost, complexity, quality control things. A lot of these, sort of bigger problems that we'll get to in a little bit can be solved with really keeping DFM, design for manufacturing, in mind as early as possible. So the prototyping phase is when you're really consolidating the product into, this is physically what it is. During conceptualization, that's where you can have all these great ideas, all these cool features, all these interesting design strategies, and dream as big as you can. That's great for conceptualization, but when it comes time to prototyping, it's about sort of slowly picking off all those features that aren't necessary and really getting things down to the MVP, the minimum viable product. Too often I see founders that they've created a product that solves a really good problem, but they've got all these other features on it. Does it need to have solar and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and, needs to be waterproof, all these things. If it doesn't need to be, and it isn't really working towards solving that problem that, your customer is paying to solve, if it doesn't help with that, then in V1s at least, it really should be removed. There's lots of opportunities to add, to release a V2 or to launch with other accessories with your product. But in the prototyping phase, you should be really focusing down on, like, what is the absolute bare minimum that I can do at a really high level of quality. So it's all about just sort of stripping away all the features that you really don't need. Another thing that needs to be sorted out during the manufacturing phase is the material selection. So during this process, you want to be as specific as you possibly can. Saying that, okay, I want the base to be made of steel, it's a good start, but you want to get as specific as you possibly can. There's 3,500 different grades of steel, and only a small handful are going to be best suited for whatever your product is. So the four main things to keep in mind are the mechanical properties, the wear of the materials, the ease of manufacturing, and the cost, like the raw cost of the material. So you really need to think about, it's a balancing act between these four things primarily. But, like, for example, is your product going to be handled a lot? It's going to be in someone's hands, they're going to be sweating on it. Is that going to corrode the material? Is that going to degrade it in any way? Or is the manufacturing cost going to be really high? Like, titanium might be a really cool material to use in your product, but Okay, maybe it's really expensive and really the tooling cost to manufacture a metal that hard is going to be really expensive. Odd things too, like what does it smell like? You don't want your product that's like going to be around someone's face to be made out of this like really stinky rubber. So you want to order as many samples as you can, test them out, feel them in your hand, try and figure out, the cost of molding or tooling that material, and obviously whatever the raw material cost is. These are really important things to keep in mind, especially when you near the end of your prototyping phase. So this might sound a little bit obvious, but I think it's still worth pointing out. To complete your prototyping phase, you need to have design files. Just because you've built something in your basement and it functions and it works great doesn't mean that, sending the physical prototype over to somebody or sending it to a factory is going to mean that, okay, it gets into production. Design files 2D files and 3D files are necessary for just about any product to be manufactured. And usually it's best to do that in conjunction with as you're putting together your physical prototype. Typically it goes conceptualization, design files, and then prototype. But sometimes we get founders coming to us that sort of went conceptualization, okay, let's build this, let's put it together, and they don't have strong design files that we can work off of. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're going through prototyping, is to really get everything down on paper. Just because you have a physical prototype doesn't mean that you're ready to jump right into production. So if you have created your prototype with DFM in mind, you've selected the materials, you've stripped it of all unnecessary features, you have design files, and you've gotten customer feedback from your target audience and implemented that, you're well on your way to getting into production. So if you guys like this type of content, we're going to be putting out more and more stuff like this. We're trying to upload every week. So please subscribe and we'll keep bringing you more insights from the development side of things, from the manufacturing side of things, and a little bit of e-commerce sprinkled in too. Cheers.